my general view is if nature and what humans teach us disagree, what humans teach us is wrong. And I was making the point about photosynthesis and plants covering their bodies in green and, making oxygen, which is emitted into the atmosphere, and sugar, which is emitted into the soil. And that would be exactly not a I win by you lose strategy. That would be a symbiosis strategy. And that seems to be the pattern of nature, is symbiosis. And so, that was an opening salvo as part of the broader meta points.
From wherever we are, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, recognising their continuing connection to this land, its waterways, the stars in the skies since time immemorial. We pay our respects to the elders, knowledge holders, and to all the generations of First Nations peoples who have nurtured their unceded sovereign lands for over 80,000 years and continue to do so today.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to the Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
Okay, Dan Kittredge. I got your surname wrong. I mothered your first name. Welcome to the Regenerative Journey, and welcome to Fat Pig Farm here. We're day 2 at the Grounded conference.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you. I know it's not your first trip to Australia.
It is my first trip to Australia.
It is.
My first
trip. James is
south of the equator.
That's right. You did say that yesterday too. And so tell me, before we get into you, what about your impressions of Grounded here in the Southern Hemisphere?
Epic, global scale, caliber, level of people. There's a large number of really impressive people here. The ratio of the caliber, the average caliber of people here is very impressive, if I can say it that way.
Oh, and so tell me, is there anything like this in the States? I mean, you guys do it times 10 to Australia generally in most things. Is there a similar kind of a gathering over there?
On the land like this, actually righteously on the land with this kind of, I don't know, not that I'm aware of.
No.
I mean, I think, this is really special. It's really special. It's got a lot of pieces, the caliber of people, but the way it's being done on the land, and just it's a really nice event.
Have you had time to get around to any of the other speakers yesterday? I know it was sort of early day 2. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how anyone particularly impressed you yesterday, or you thought, shit, that's a good thing?
Who, I can't remember her name. The woman who's doing the research, did all the stuff with the brain health.
Felice?
Felice.
Yeah.
I saw her presentation. There was another woman who was doing the talk about nutritional dark matter, which I didn't get to, but I had a great chat with her afterwards.
Stacy?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry, names. I got too many names in my head.
No, that's good.
I get faces, but not names.
Yeah, no, well, first time in the Southern Hemisphere, I'm not surprised that you're in a spin. It's quite the opposite. Tell me,
the ozone hole is quite.
That's a lot of.
People don't worry about the snakes, but do worry about the ozone.
There was a black snake here just yesterday. Actually, there was someone said there's a brown, there's a black, and there's a tiger snake. So, I don't know which one it was.
I heard it was a tiger.
Oh, it was a tiger.
Yeah. People were like, the Kiwis are like, put your shoes on. The Aussies are like, put your hat on.
The ozone. I haven't heard about the ozone for years. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Is it really? I don't know.
I don't know.
But I actually heard the other day. Someone said, "How'd you sleep?" And I said, "Pretty well." And they said, "Well, that's because the air is thicker down here in Tasmania."
Thicker?
It's thicker. That's what they said. Or denser. I
was just talking to this guy from, I don't know, not too far from here. He said he gets frosts in Christmas.
Here?
In Tasmania.
Yeah.
At 300 meters because there's no ozone and the heat just radiates because there's like less, I don't know, atmosphere. Basically, the heat radiates out, and even in the middle of the summer, summer solstice, you get. I mean, last time I had a frost in summer solstice, I was in Siberia. Not that was impressive, but
well, I have to say I'm not on camera, thankfully, because my face is as red as a beetroot today. There might be something in that, Ozzy. I better look that up.
Yeah.
Hey Dan, let's get back to you. You spoke yesterday. You spoke yesterday about nutrient density. I mean, that's your no. Oh no, that's today.
Today in 45 minutes is nutrient density. Yesterday was principles of biological systems. How did nature evolve things?
Because I reckon on the agenda they had they'd sort of on one of the formats they had it the other way around.
I think that's what was supposed to happen, but what got published.
Right.
I think
went just go with it.
Yeah.
Tell me. Well, let's talk about that. I thought one of the great points you made yesterday was you referenced Darwin and natural selection or survival of the fittest. You have a different view on that. Tell me about that.
Well, my general view is if nature and what humans teach us disagree, what humans teach us is wrong. And I was making the point about photosynthesis and plants covering their bodies in green and, making oxygen, which is emitted into the atmosphere, and sugar, which is emitted into the soil. And that would be exactly not a I win by you lose strategy. That would be a symbiosis strategy. And that seems to be the pattern of nature, is symbiosis. And so, that was an opening salvo as part of the broader meta points. But
and tell me more about your presentation yesterday. Then, what were some of the summarize that you did a reasonably long session? Can you
you tell me which you took from it? No.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I wasn't there for didn't do the whole thing because I was doing interviews yesterday. Yeah. But I'm turning up for your nutrient density one. At 10 o'clock, straight after you, so I'm conscious of the time. But for those who weren't there, myself included, what were some of the other points you made that you want people to sort of know about? We can.
So the broad point is that I don't care what kind of plant you think you're growing. As I understand it, the plants are in the middle of the food chain, and we can say animals are at the top of the food chain. That puts microbes at the bottom of the food chain. And so if you're focusing on raising plants, you're missing the point. The real agenda is supporting the microbes. And I like to focus on, this is basically a highlights reel from my 2-day course, which is now turning into a 4-day course, which is, like I said yesterday, freely available on YouTube. But I like to identify and focus on 5 basic environmental conditions that are, I think, necessary for the bottom of the food chain to function. And that would be air. So if you don't have sufficient air in the soil, the microbes will asphyxiate. Food. If you don't have sufficient food in the soil, the microbes will starve to death. Water. If you don't have sufficient water in the soil, the microbes will die of thirst. Minerals. If you don't have necessary minerals present, they can't engage the biochemistry necessary to build their bodies, etc. And biology, then they themselves, if you don't have that full suite of microbes present, then it's like there's no snakes in Ireland, or I guess now apparently New Zealand. I didn't know that. So
it's not apparently.
Yeah,
but they've got lots of other Australian natives of ours, like wallabies and possums. So they're
okay.
Yeah, they're not happy.
No
about
platypus
that.
Though.
No platypus. Probably good if there was. Be like this.
I really want to see a platypus.
You might see some around here. Yeah,
but I mean, basically, in almost all cases, the things that our land needs for microbes to function well, which then is what nature does, that nature grows plants. We don't have to grow the plants, it's nature doing it. The things that we need, air, water, food, basic minerals, microbes, are almost all entirely free, locally available, extraordinarily inexpensive. And if we can identify which limiting factors our systems are experiencing and address them sort of locally and naturally, the cost of production, the effort, the economic viability, the soil health, the nutrient levels, all those things begin to dial in brilliantly. And in many cases, what we've been taught about how to grow plants comes from people trying to sell us stuff. and that mechanistic, reductionist, colonized perspective, pH, fertilizer, a disease, all that kind of stuff is really I would say a series of, false storylines. We've got models from indigenous perspective, tradition globally, which have shown how easy it is to proactively manage at landscape, at continent scale. We've got the hard Western science to verify and explain the science, the technical how it works. And then I think finally I focused on the role of intention and consciousness. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the biggest X factor out there is your beinghood. And if you're treating your land as though it's a factory floor or a chemistry set, you're missing almost the entire point. And the level to which you can engage sensitively, that's an absolutely massive piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
It's not about individual practices. It's about sensitive communication and engagement with a living system, which you are a steward of and servant to, as opposed to master of.
Tell me about that then. Like, how can a steward of the landscape, or even those who may not have necessarily the responsibility of stewardship, but how can anyone be more sensitive? How can they engage with nature? How can they create relationship with nature in that way? Apart from a physical activity, which is very helpful as well. But what other sort of, whether it's more subtle energy kind of approaches, how would you suggest people can start doing that?
Not subtle energy, not sensitive. My general point is that if you eat food that is good for you and your children, your family, if you're a buyer of food and you buy the food that is most nutritious, that is a massive, massive act. Effectively, it seems that nutritional value in food connects beautifully to soil health, to ecosystem function, to cultural coherence and consciousness. And so, I say LEDs and Priuses are nice, but I think if you really have, if you really want to use your power, your vote, to systemically positively impact, choosing the best food possible is right up there at the top of what you can do.
And I guess that, forming a relationship with that farmer, that's producing food, if that's at all possible, if you're close enough.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we found through our research is actually a bit, how do you say, humbling, if you're willing to be humbled. Just because someone is local, just because someone is organic, just because someone is, friendly, does not mean they necessarily have high levels of soil health. There's all kinds of well-meaning organic. I come from the organic culture. My parents were actively involved in the organic movement in the U.S., and so I could speak about other permaculture tradition or biodynamic tradition or agroecological tradition, but I'll speak about the organic tradition, and I'll say, I know a bunch of really well-meaning organic practitioners who...
Even when you say organic, are you in the context of certification?
Certified
organic?
or not certified.
Okay.
Either you just at the farmer's market are like, I engage in organic practices, and that's just, you trust me. That's my honor as speaking to that, or I'm certified organic. I'm about to present this data here, and it's humbling. It's humbling. The nutritional caliber of most food, which includes local, which includes organic, which includes biodynamic, which includes regenerative, is relatively quite low, because we are engaging in a series of practices. We're not engaging in a coherent, comprehensive dance with life and supporting her flourishing. And so I like to use the metaphor of religion, and I say I'm pretty sure Jesus was, a pretty cool dude. Like actually, I believe he did walk on water. I believe he was at the level of levitation. I believe he was spiritually evolved to do manifestation of the breads and the fishes and things like that. No, like straight up, like if you go to India, they're like, yeah, that's just what people can do when they get to higher levels of being. But you could, the people who were engaged in the Crusades, who were using Christ as their justification for raping and pillaging, it's like that with organic. We engage in a lot of deeply disruptive acts to nature
In the name of
organic, with our noses well elevated. And the current ism of the decade is regenerative. And there's plenty of people in the permaculture community who are similarly proud of themselves. And, I think there's a big difference between the talk and the walk, and the practices and the results. And so you can get to know your farmer, and they can be a well-meaning person, but actually the level of life in the soil is a very high bar, which most of us are not reaching.
So how do we get there then? Like as a food producer, what's the missing bit? We're applying practices, physical, whether it's biological stimulants, whether it's whatever, you pick one, they're all there under whatever umbrella of production you want to put yourself under. What's the bit that is missing then? Like what can we learn from you, or what do we need to know to sort of?
It's about the results.
Yeah.
It's about getting the results. Parenting might be a good example. If you've got a 2-year-old who's acting out, you can say, they need a reprimand, they need to go be punished, or you can stand back and you can see that whole being and you can say, he's hungry, or he's tired, or, the energy of this person is hard for her to deal with. And so it's about that sensitive, deeper caringness and attention to the nuance of detail. And it's not about following a regimented practice. It's about sensitive, loving. It's life we're living in. It's a living ecosystem. It's nature. Life is the reality we're in. It's not a chemistry set. It's not protons and neutrons and et cetera, et cetera. It's life. It's consciousness. It's multi, octave vibration and with love at the center of it, and being in relationship to your land. With the more we can engage our land in that way, the more we can receive the insights about what the land needs and when, which allows us to fulfill our capacity as caretakers.
So I guess it's a nurturing role, is it? Nurture is, that's when you said parenting, it's like, well, we've got to, it's not about applying a recipe or a formula, because that doesn't work for everyone. But it's a general, a concept of a nurture, which is, it's many things to different people, isn't it?
It's a dance. It's a path. It's a, I don't know the traditional nuance of this part of the world, but from where I come from in the North America, we call it, the people have this concept that every animal has a role, that wolf has a role and chipmunk has a role, and the human animal has a role of caretaker. And we don't own the land, we belong to the land. And it's our stewardship of the land that is our fulfillment of our role as the human animal. And as I understand it, that's one way of saying it philosophically. From an empirical standpoint, it seems to correlate with levels of soil life. The more life you have in the soil, the more things function. And microbes need air to breathe. And so just because you no-tilled doesn't mean you have aeration. Just because you cover cropped doesn't mean you have hydration. So you can go through a series of practices, but if you don't have those dynamics in place, that nature, that life, that the bottom of the food chain, the microbes who actually are in charge need, and they die off, then the whole system falls apart. And yeah,
And your work, Dan, is and those of others, I guess more and more is working with objective measurement, right? Like that's which is I guess good for a lot of people because they kind of they're maybe not sort of looking at the airy fairy stuff and feel good. It's like I actually need some numbers to whether it's about going into production, whether it's about the economics of it,
markets, markets, metrics.
Yeah,
if you're engaging in the 3D world, then you have to play by you have to be able to speak the language of and work through the framework of. I love the scientific method, the concept of, thesis, hypothesis, experimentation, verification. I would say the lingua franca, should be facts, and that's a great way to engage the conversation. And so, if through the Western rational empirical scientific method we can't find these patterns, then we should question our hypotheses.
What are some of the data that more recently you've either found or you've put together yourself that is really supportive of what your philosophy or your own not your practices necessarily, but the what you teach, what you're educating people on? What's some of the really more recent stuff you're going, this is kind of indisputable?
Well, I mean, just the sheer scale of variation of nutrient levels in food. We started this research wing of the organization in 2016, sort of strategically envisioning the steps in the process in 2017 with the actual, work, first building a meter and then building labs and running hundreds of samples and then thousands of samples and of dozens of crops across multiple continents over multiple years, overlaying nutrient levels in the plants against soil metrics, against management practice data. And I use carrots as an example when I'm giving my presentation. I think the carrot with the highest level of phosphorus had 8 times as much as the carrot with the lowest level of phosphorus. With antioxidants, the carrot with the highest level of antioxidants had 40 times as much as the carrot with the lowest level. So you'd have to eat 40 of these carrots to get as many antioxidants as if you ate one of those. That's massive, right? It's a massive, massive nutritional variation, and the curve is like this. It's like the peak of the curve is in the 20th percentile, or the 15th percentile, or the 25th percentile. Almost all the sample set is just remarkably low in relation to what's possible. And like I said, it didn't matter if it was local, organic, conventional, regenerative, biodynamic. That's the pattern we found. And so we can see that there are outliers, there are producers doing a really good job, in all soil types, with all varieties, with all management practices or identities or points of purchase. Now, those things didn't correlate. The only thing that correlated was level of life in the soil. And so, we understand through evolutionary biology that it was the microbes that evolved the plants. And only when the microbes are functioning well should we expect the plants to be functioning well. It all fits with what we understand through science. It's all quite intuitive, actually. But I think in many cases, our tribal nature wants us to have an us and a them. And we're biodynamic, you're not. We're regenerative, you're not. We're local, you're not. And that's fear, that's separation. There's love, which is unity, and there's fear, which is separation. And
it's almost irrelevant, that stuff, isn't it? It's like it's almost irrelevant. It's like where's the rubber hit the road here?
The rubber hits the road with the level of life in the soil, with the level of vitality of the ecosystem, and that's really what matters. And it's actually like it could be a place to coalesce around. We could all come with our humility and our wisdom. The permaculture perspective has great insight. The biodynamic perspective has amazing insight. The indigenous perspective, brilliant. The Western scientific method, brilliant insight. Like all these, Steiner talks about the sort of the streams, right? So weaving the streams, like it doesn't need to be this stream or that stream. It can be a strong cord if we weave the streams. But let's start with humility, as opposed to arrogance, which seems to be the way that in many cases we identify. I'm no-till. We are God's greatest gift. We are no-tillers. Well, if your soil's tight, you got to figure out some way to get air into it. And so some strategic tillage at some point in time may be actually a very appropriate thing to do. You can find, cases where almost all things that someone would say is bad are actually good if building levels of life in the soil is the objective.
I love the idea of that rope, the threads, and that, obviously they're so much stronger as one. We are.
Yes.
As opposed to the individual, which makes perfect sense. And tell me, with the bionutrient sort of testing, and is it always a case of the more the better? I mean,
no.
There's ratios, I guess, we have to look at
That's
as well, and the relationship between those, because you guys have developed or are developing a bionutrient analysis machine or a proby thing, or a probe thing, like a spectrometer.
Spectrometer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when we started the research work in 2016, we identified 3 questions. And we had this vision. The vision was, if people who buy food, which would be anybody from a wholesaler, retailer, packer, consumer, anybody, if people who buy food could know the nutritional caliber of the choices they had, they would preference the ones that are better. That was our thesis. If you knew that of the 3 bags of carrots or the 3 jugs of milk you got available to you, one's 80 out of 100, one's 40 out of 100, one's 20 out of 100, our hypothesis is you'll choose the 80 more than you choose a 20. And our thought was that because you involve money in that process, and money is a very powerful force in today's world, then we could facilitate massive transformation of the way agriculture is done. We could properly disrupt agriculture if we could create that reality where people could choose based on empirical facts.
Everything else would go out the window, wouldn't it?
That's the idea. It's like certifications, labels, marketing, claims. Like, get rid of it. It's actually not true. I mean, it's a true as in harmony with nature and life. And so to accomplish that vision, there were 3 things we identified that needed to be true. And the first one was that there was significant nutrient variation, and there wasn't sufficient data to verify that. The second one was that that nutritional variation correlates with soil health. Again, we don't even have a definition of soil health. So, and the third question was, is it possible to build a handheld, consumer-priced, flash of light, ray gun nutrient meter? Again, when we started this in 2016, most people who were in the know said none of these 3 things are possible. It's not true that nutrient variation is dramatic. If you went to this PhD research scientists, it's not true that soil health is a causal factor in the small variation that must exist. It's probably soil type or variety, was their argument. And certainly building consumer-priced ray guns is, absolute ridiculous. It's Star Trek. It's not, it's not possible. So we went through that process of building a framework to interrogate those 3 questions. And by 2021, we had answered them all in the affirmative. We had shown that nutritional variation is dramatic, that it does correlate with at least levels of soil life, which we think is a good stand-in for soil health. And we had built consumer-priced flash of light nutrient meters that people could use to assess individual nutrients in specific crops. The real question still remains. So then, with that conclusion, we understand that, at least from our perspective, this vision is a possible vision. The issue we have is, what is quality? What is 80 out of 100 and what is 20 out of 100? And that is a really serious scientific question. And so we're an NGO. We're a nonprofit educational organization. We are not a company. We do not have...
So that's the Bionutrient Food Association.
Precisely. Yeah. And our scientific wing is the Bionutrient Institute.
Yeah.
And so our intention is not to be a company selling meters, building and selling meters. That is not our objective. Our objective is to work to define quality in the most empirical, honorable, transparent way possible, which we presume is going to be a series of levels and ratios of nutrients at the end of it. And then we hand that information to anybody who wants to build meters to build, manufacture, distribute, market, etc. So, yeah, we have built a meter that we have used to prove that it is possible. If we can do it, if we can build a meter as a little nonprofit with no, real money, then it certainly can be done by big companies.
I guess the other thing too, Dan, is it's one thing to have a result, a measurement, the carrot, and then you can do it with a apple, all right, or something, another
beef or milk or
whatever, any other food thing. The level of nutrients is going to be different in the apple to the steak. But relative to what? Like what's actually good for an apple and what's good for a steak?
It's $1 million per crop to figure it out.
And it's like there's probably some algorithm that's involved with trying to sort of.
This is what I'm going to walk through in the presentation.
Yeah.
It's the whole process.
Okay.
And we, it's for each crop. It's a global process. We ask people to send in. For beef was what we've seriously worked with so far with, and wheat is our next crop, and then we're hoping to do milk and potatoes next, and crop by crop by crop.
And kind of almost benchmark it.
We have to actually engage, look at all the biochemistry in the crops, look at the microbiome, look at the management practices, look at the soil metrics, do human health trials. Only when we've actually, created this metadata set and asked those with the credential to, provide insight on it and put that back into the, big data algorithm, do we expect we'll be able to find these correlations? And so it's original research. No one's done it. Like we're just figuring it out on the fly. And our thought is that's the way to do it, is to honestly, openly, and categorically interrogate these questions. And whatever we come up with initially will be an initial definition. And we hope it'll be iterative. So in 3 years, our definition is more nuanced than it is now. And in 5 years, it'll be maybe actually quite good for each crop. And hopefully what's 100 now will be 90 in 5 years and 80 in 7 years, because we'll have supported producers and actually figuring out how to do better. And so it's a constantly, improving, like it's a race to the top as opposed to a race to the bottom. But, following the path of nature, which is symbiosis, and mutual empowerment as opposed to competition, and let the market compete. But let's let the nucleating structure around which the market competes be an open and coherent one.
Dan, conscious of time, you got to get prepped. One last question, which could go for 3 hours. What motivates you to do all this?
Well, 25 years ago, was graced with the experience of superconsciousness in the Himalayas. I was on a quest to answer the question, why? Why should I do anything? What's the purpose of life? What am I doing here?
You asked me that before, so I'm just going to...
No, absolutely.
Who
am I? What am I doing?
And I was stumped, absolutely.
My father, told me I should go to school because that's your job. I'm like, why? He's like, because that's what you're supposed to do. I'm like, that's not a good enough answer. And I was a bit of a recalcitrant is a polite word for it. Until I came to the, through my own process, that the answer to the question why is love. And that, I am most happy, the most selfish thing I can do is to empower everyone around me, because when I'm surrounded by empowered people, my life is better. So to that Darwinian thing about survival of the fittest versus symbiosis, my understanding is that we can't tune into our higher natures. We can't ground our subtle, deep spirit without our forms being coherent. And as our form is built from what we consume, and if what we consume is incoherent, we should expect to be incoherent, and we should expect our culture to be such. So if we can create a reality where people are building their bodies out of coherence, whether they're aware of it or not, we should expect to begin to have the systemic cultural issues begin to be healed. And we can't heal these things through fighting. We heal these things through building solutions. And I think food is foundational and we haven't talked about psychic and emotional food. We've only talked about physical food. It's definitely much more than just a physical substance. It's the way you eat it and the thoughts you have and you're exposed to and the emotions you engage in. And there's a whole another conversation here. But that's sort of an answer.
Yeah, there's so much more, I know, and I'm so grateful to have had the time with you today. You better get going to your next thing, your next gig. And when I get to the States next, I'm going to look you up. If we can tee up a bit of a powwow then, that'd be awesome.
I'll be back in Australia in a couple of months. So
in when?
Well, I've got a couple of days free coming up.
Yep.
But I also will be back in April.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Well, let's talk offline about that. There's so much more. And thank you so much for that, Dan. That's awesome. All the best for the next time. I'm going to be following you over to the plant tent. You in the plant tent?
I'm not sure.
This one?
Someone will show me, I'm sure.
Actually, I think you're in the soil tent.
They're all pretty close.
They're not far away. Dan, thanks so much. You go get prepped and I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Good man.